Good morning and welcome back. I hope everybody's been getting through all this little snowmageddon we've been having. Excuse me. I know on Sunday I only got about 2.5 inches, but I know some of you in mid to southern Bergen County got a lot more. And then of course today it started off. It looks like we're going to have about 3 or 4 inches. Luckily, I think it's pretty much done. Maybe a little flurry might come later, but it looks like we'll be okay for today. Who knows what happens the rest of the week. But I want to go back. I want to say a lot of good job on the newspaper quiz. Newspapers are still there. And you know what? There is still something. There is still something about getting your name in the paper. And usually that could be a pretty positive thing. Remember when you were in like middle school in seventh grade and you scored a goal in soccer and they put it in the little local paper. As a matter of fact, what those are now... as a lot of the regular daily newspapers are dying out, one of the last to actually survive were what we call community weeklies. Those are those newspapers that used to show up once a week at your doorstep, like on a Wednesday or Thursday. And they would usually have just local news. Like when I say local, I'm from southern Bergen County originally, so we had the South Bergenite. And I used to cover only about 8 towns in southern Bergen County. And, if it was Pop Warner or soccer or something like that, girls basketball, like rec basketball, you could get your name in the paper if you had a good game. But even a lot of those have disappeared now because the advertising dried up. And a lot of what you have now, instead of having these community weeklies, is what we call patches. So you go online and there's going to be a patch from your particular, the Ridgewood patch or the Cliffside Park patch. And that's where you'll see some of your local reporting newspaper, but it's now online. Of course, that's pretty much where everybody is anyway. So newspapers are still here, but I think there's going to come a day. I actually thought it was going to happen earlier. I thought that now, like I was talking back in 2003, 2004, 2005, I thought by 2020, 2021, you could walk, like say, for example, past the bodega and that cart that would be outside where you had the different newspapers. Sometimes they put a rock on it so the wind wouldn't blow it. I thought that those would be gone, but you know what? They're still there. There are still those people, and you know who it is. You've still got grandparents who cannot begin their day without a physical newspaper. But even that's it because your parents now watch all their news online. We get our updates on our phones or on our other devices, any news item that comes up. So online is pretty much where it's going to be. But I know what you don't have. Hopefully my wife will get that. But I know what you don't have is down at the Hoboken train station. You don't have those big, huge 60-gallon bins anymore that used to be filled up by 8 a.m. with newspapers. Those things are gone. So let's go ahead and move on. As you can see attached to today's email is your research paper assignment. Okay? You were to watch the PBS documentary called Generation Like. Okay? Now, it's a little older. There have been a couple of things that have come along, but they haven't impressed me as much for an assignment. And I've been using quite a few of these for assignments. As a matter of fact, the guy who put this together had actually created another one previously that I used that I thought was really good. So you are to watch Generation Like, and then you are to write a 3 to 5 page paper. Taking aside, is this new media, social media, the internet, all this new technology, is it having a positive or negative effect on our young people? All right. Now you have to have at least 3 sources. The video cannot be used as a source. You could reference the video in your paper, but it can't be one of your 3 sources that you use in your research. And it is due by Friday, April 2nd at 12 noon. So you've got plenty of time to sit down, watch the PBS documentary, and I have the link there for you. It's easy to find. And to go ahead and watch it and then to write your research paper. So it's pretty cut and dry. Take one side or the other. And I have to tell you, just off track before we get on to today's chapter, I'm always... I think it's always funny about, how people view, like social media, the internet, and of course, like, you say, like, your parents or grandparents would be like, oh, you spend too much time on that internet. Oh, when I was a kid, we went outside till the lights went on, and when the street lights went on, that was our cue to go home, blah, 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 blah. I would never spend, those are the same people that you go back 20, 25 years ago when Nintendo was out, you couldn't drag them away from the Nintendo. They keep forgetting about that. And to give you even more examples of how the old people talk, but maybe just couldn't back it up, I'm going to tell you right now, I'll be straight up with you. If Facebook was around when I was 17 years old in 1982, the beginning of my senior year in high school, if there was Facebook around, I'm going to guarantee you, I would have sent a Facebook friend request to every cheerleader in Bergen County. That's easy. So, I'll tell you another example about maybe some of the positive things about this new media and new outlets and everything else. Take a look at the jersey that I'm wearing. Okay? In 1985 and 1986, I was stationed in northern Japan. It was an air base. So we had all 4 services. I was a Marine, of course. And because of some weird, stupid satellite law, we could never get live football on TV. Like Armed Forces Network could not bring in live feeds. We would always have to have it videoed and then flown into us. Don't ask me what it was. It was so silly. I don't even remember. But what that did is it made our base football team even more popular. And we would have a base football team and we would play against other bases in the Pacific. And I was the captain of our team in 1985 and 1986. And I always cherish my memories. A lot of my Facebook friends are guys that I was teammates with back then. And we always reminisce about how great it was. Well, then I'm on my Facebook. And of course, I like sports and stuff. And all of a sudden, what comes up? But some website called customjersey.com or something to that effect. And I'm looking at it. And for less than $100, I could get a custom-made jersey, or 2 jerseys, actually. So I looked at my old pictures, I got the color schemes, and I went ahead and I gave myself this year a new Christmas present, which is I got replicas made. I have this, and then I have a gold one with green letters of our jerseys from our base football team, the Misawa Jets, because it was Misawa Air Base Japan, and we were the Misawa Jets, especially because we had F-16s. So I wouldn't have been able to do that without the internet, without all this new media, without Facebook. So that's my take on it. But hey, you're going to hear me rant too about how I used to walk uphill 12 miles to school every day in 12 inches of snow. Let's go ahead and move on. 1877. A lot of things are going on in this country. You just had this guy, Alexander Graham Bell, invent the telephone. And then this other guy in New Jersey, this Jersey boy, keeps coming up with these ideas, keeps coming up with these inventions. And one of them is, I got a video I'm going to attach to this email. He comes up with an idea. He takes a piece of tin foil and he puts it on this little circular thing and he puts a needle to it. Now, the tin foil had a way of absorbing things. Okay? And when I say tin foil, we're talking something just like, if you have a 12-ounce can of Coke. That kind of piece of foil. That kind of piece of tin. And he put it on this little circular thing, and he turned it, and when the needle would hit into the tin, he would talk. And the vibration would hit the pin, or the needle that was in the foil. So he said, Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. And everywhere that Mary went, that lamb was sure to go. And then he would turn it over. He would put the needle back into those grooves that it just made. He'd put a little speaker on where he was just speaking into. And sure enough, when he turned it, you would hear the sound that he recorded. And of course, in 1877, the first sound recording by our very own Jersey boy, Thomas Edison. Now, what's interesting is that this was just something great. The only problem is Edison went on to do some other things. He wanted to put electric light bulbs out somewhere. Electric light bulb, I don't know. Should have been sound recordings. And then later on, he was working on something called moving pictures. I don't know. Should have worked more on the sound recordings. But anyway, so sound recordings do come along. But the tin foil just didn't really work anymore. We had to find a better way to do it. And one of the best ways they came up with is what we call ceramic. Now, this is what a ceramic disc. This is an early disc. Okay? Now, with the ceramic disc, you could put about 2 minutes of sound on each side. And this disc was huge. It was about this big. And when you put it on one of those early record players, okay, as you see here, you'd have to crank up the handle. The handle's over here on this side. And you crank it up to about 78 rounds per minute. And then you put the needle down on this sound recording or record. And through that speaker, the needle would transmit the sound and you would hear it. And again, it would be these grooves inside this piece of ceramic. But for a long time, the sales or the business of selling sound recordings didn't really take off. I mean, yeah, people did own sound recordings. They did have these records, but they didn't have many of them. And one of the reasons why is they were so vulnerable. They were so vulnerable to break it. For example, take a look at this scene from It's a Wonderful Life from 1946. Okay. Now, one of the things I think is funny is in this particular YouTube video, it says that she smashes a vinyl record. No, it wasn't vinyl. It was ceramic. That's why she broke it so easily. And that was the problem with ceramic records. Number one, you only had about 2 minutes on each side. Number two, they were big and bulky and heavy and very fragile. That young lady took that and hit it on the corner and it smashed into 1,000,000 pieces. And that was the problem with ceramic records. So they weren't really selling, so there wasn't really a business for it. Well, that was until this young guy comes along. Okay, can anybody see? There we go. We got that glare out of there. See that young fella there? It's another Jersey boy. Okay? I'll give you an even better picture of him. There you go. That's a young kid from Hoboken by the name of Frank Sinatra. Now, as we go through the, since 1920 is when radio pretty much became mainstream. So now, if you wanted to listen to your favorite music or other, things that you like to listen to, you could listen on the radio. You would listen to your favorite music on the radio. You would just have to wait for your favorite songs. But if you wanted to always continuously listen to your favorite songs, you would buy a record, but they weren't that rare, and they were kind of expensive, and again, they were fragile. So the sale of the sound recordings, as a matter of fact, I remember just recently, PBS, Ken Burns, the documentarian who did the Civil War for PBS, he did baseball, World War II, Vietnam, he's done like presidents. Well, he did a documentary, a long one, on the history of country music. And when they talk about in the early, late 20s, early 1930s, they were talking about some of the most successful country music artists of that time, and they were only selling like 20,000 records nationwide, okay, which is minuscule. Especially even today's standards, that is minuscule. Because there just weren't many record people just didn't want to buy it. Why am I going to buy it if I tap it on the table, it's going to break? Okay? But someone like Frank Sinatra was getting all these young girls to go to the stores to buy records. Well, wait a minute. Maybe we could really make a buck with the sale of these sound recordings, these records. Well, then World War II comes. Now, of course, all efforts go into World War II. Well, after World War II, a new design comes up for sound recordings. Okay? We're not going to use ceramic anymore. Now we're going to go to something called vinyl. Okay? Now, this is a vinyl record. Okay? Now, one of the things you'll notice is you got different grooves in there. And one of the reasons why is you now have 25 minutes, not 2 minutes, 25 minutes. That's about 5 or 6 songs on one side, whereas the other side will have another 20. So you're talking about an hour's worth of sound recording on one LP. Why were they called LPs? Well, these were called LPs because they were long playing. Because you could have 25 minutes on each side, and you could have like 5 or 6 songs on each side. So in 1947, 1948, we start seeing the LP come along. And then also accompanied by the single record. Now what these were, they had one song on each side. So you got two songs for these little records. They were compact, they were lightweight because they were vinyl, easy to pack up, easy to carry with you, and they only cost about 25 cents. And for a long time, they only cost like 25 cents. Two songs, 25 cents. As a matter of fact, you can ask your grandparents, okay? Ask your grandparents what like their favorite song was when they were young, when they were like a teenager. And then ask them, oh, that song, well, what was side B? That was always a big deal. Whenever you got a record, your favorite song was on side A. Usually there was another song on side B. All right? And those were 45 records. And the reason why they're called 45s is because they spun around 45 rounds per minute on the record player. Now, we've got the vinyl. So now we have long playing recordings. We have the 45 recordings. We're on vinyl now, no more ceramic. All right? You can bend these things. You can tap them on the corner. They're not going to break at all. But how are we going to make a buck? Well, sure enough, who comes along? Who comes along, people, to help to make a buck? Ta-da! Television arrives in the late 1940s. So what's television got to do with sound recordings? Well, here's what happened. Television is brand new. And one of the things that I will always tell you is we are a very visual being. We love to be visually entertained. That's just who we are. We're human beings. We love to be visually entertained. And when television comes along, people absolutely love it. They fall for it big time. But in order to be visually entertained, you have to have entertainers. Well, where do you get the entertainers from? Well, you couldn't get them from the movies. They're on the big screen. So you had to go pluck them from radio. So now radio, and we're going to learn more about this in the radio chapter, but now radio loses all their talent to TV. What are they going to have? Well, here comes one of the great partnerships that still exist today. What radio then do to help save them is they made a deal with the record companies. And what radio stations now started to do, instead of having this wild format where they had talk shows and dinner shows and kids shows and some this type of music and then that type of music and then that, they went to recorded music as their formats. Okay? From now on, my radio station will play nothing all day but this type of recorded music. And here's what would happen. You would be sitting at home, or you'd be sitting driving in the car with your parents. You would hear a song on the radio. You would like it so much, you would then go down to a record store and go buy it. And that's how they set up the business end of sound recordings. Now, how would it take off? Because we really need somebody to help this take off and become a huge medium in this country, sound recordings. Well, if you tune in on Thursday, we're going to tell you how the sound recording business began to take off and who is the one who set it in motion. All right, guys, we'll see you on Thursday.